Hey folks, my name is Kai Morales. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm a scare counseling intern. Right now, we'll be going over boundaries, what a boundary is, what a boundary could look like, what, you know, setting boundaries are like, why it's hard to set boundaries, and just things like that. So, to get into it, we'll just start with a little introduction. Boundary could be a limit that we use to love and work with ourselves and others without resentment and with integrity. So, in this, it's important to think about hey, if we don't know what a solid and significant no is to us, it's going to be hard to identify and express what a healthy and genuine yes is for other people and for ourselves too. And, boundaries, these yeses and nos, can feel different when we're with different people or are in different situations. Boundaries, they should be flexible, most boundaries should be flexible to shift and fit to what we need or want at that time. We may find that, some boundaries that we had in the past may no longer be necessary or relevant now. And we may also find that what wasn't a boundary in the past may need to be a boundary now. And so boundaries, it's just basically a way to think about what we want to allow, and what we will and want to not allow, So by having these sort of sets of yeses and nos, it shows like, hey, I really respect myself. I care about myself. And I want others to really care about and respect me too. So within this form of thinking about boundaries, they're not punishments. There's no need to apologize for setting a boundary. In fact, instead of thinking about boundaries as closing things up, you're actually opening yourself up by sharing your real self. By saying hey, I really care about you. I really care about our relationship. And so because of that, I want to let you know what's really important to me, and what are some things that make me feel loved and respected. And because I love and respect myself, I have this sort of identified, and I want to share that with you. So again, it's this opening up of deeper, more real connections with both yourself and with others. There's also a lot of different types of boundaries. In this portion, I'll be going over just a couple. And especially with gatherings that are coming up in the later part of the year, there's a really commonly sort of recognized boundary, which is physical. Having that touch or just closeness of your personal body, and also your sense of personal space, both physically and also materially, having a sense of privacy, a sense of safety, shelter, a place that's just yours. That's a physical boundary. That also includes, noise tolerance. If things are getting really, really loud and really, really overwhelming, that's a physical boundary, sort of imposition, I guess, violation of just whoa, that's a lot. That's too much for me. And again, as I'm sort of gesturing, these boundaries, they can be expressed verbally. They could also be expressed non-verbally. I'm also, thinking about how, in relation to gatherings, a lot of folks are used to just going around, giving hugs. Everybody gets a hug, and you need to receive that hug. And just thinking about hey, maybe in these upcoming gatherings, especially with COVID, not just assuming, okay, yeah, everybody gets a hug. maybe asking first, like, would you like a hug? And being respectful of the answers of like, yes, I would love a hug, and answers that are like, no, no, I don't really want a hug, or I don't really want a hug right now. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe after this pandemic is over, and just being respectful of that. And again, with material items too, especially when there's like shared spaces, like you bring like your suitcase, you bring your backpack, you bring a bag, your purse. Um, and others like are rifling through that, saying like, hey, whoa, you're like, this is my personal space, you know, these are sets of my private items. Like I can share some things with you that I'm okay with, you know, having shared, but there are some things in there that I would like to keep for myself, so I hope that you can respect that and not go through my things without my permission, So understanding again, okay, physical items, physical body, physical boundaries, mental boundaries. Mental boundaries are having to do with, like your right to have your own thoughts, your own opinions, your own beliefs. And as long as, again, they're not harming someone, or harming yourself, you don't deserve to be made fun of or forced into thinking differently. It's important to recognize that, hey, mental boundary violations can look like, oh, you should think this, you should think that, you should be this, you should be that, you should do this, you should do that. Whoa. This is what I feel, this is what I believe, this is what I think. This is what you feel, this is what you think, this is what you believe. Like recognizing this is what's mine, that is what's yours. Within, again, that same line of like opinions, beliefs, thoughts, mental boundaries, emotional boundaries. You have a right to your own feelings. You shouldn't be sort of insulted or belittled or persuaded that you should feel a certain way. It's important to think about like, how can I take responsibility and accountability of my feelings and recognize, okay, these are mine, those are yours. So it's important to figure out, again, where we are in the midst of interacting with other folks. So some emotional boundary violations can look like pleasing others at your expense, like sacrificing yourself just to please other people. So like saying like, oh, like I'm so tired, like I just want to break. I'm really sad. I just want to like just be in the sadness. Feeling that, but then just going out and being like, oh, I'm gonna go do this for you, I'm gonna go do that for you, doing this, doing that, doing way too much, and neglecting your own self. That's an emotional boundary violation that you do to yourself sometimes, that we do to ourselves sometimes. Another one could be, allowing others' moods to dictate our moods. And this looks like, for example, coming into a space and feeling like, oh, I'm really sad, I'm really down. And then just seeing like other folks around you being like really happy, really joyful, really, playful, and like their moods are like really high. And you're just like, whoa, I see this huge shift, like, but they're feeling really, really high. So like, I'll be really high too. I'll just go with them. No, no, it's not necessary. That's again an emotional boundary violation that occurs when you cut off that sense of like where you are, who you are, how you feel. So again, it's important to recognize that boundary work is necessarily not just with others, but also within yourself. Some signs that you've been ignoring your boundaries or your boundaries have been ignored by others is sort of, what I was saying a little bit earlier about, having everybody else dictate how you are, what you think, what you feel, what you do, all these different things. There's no sense of individuality, you know. Another sign where your boundaries have been ignored is, feeling like dissociated with me, which means, like just being disconnected again. Telling yourself, like, when you're really tired, like, oh, it doesn't matter, like, that I'm tired, I need to go do these things for this person. Or, saying, like, oh yeah, my sadness, I'll just ignore that, it'll go away, like, everybody else is happy right now, I need to be really happy too. It's again this cutting off of yourself from yourself and with others. Another sign that your boundaries have been ignored is, when you feel really, really angry and have all this resentment that you've been holding and keeping for yourself, by not sharing your boundaries. So, like, these sort of your boundaries have been, like, imposed upon, have been pressed upon, have been pushed, have been shoved, and the emotional reaction and physical reaction that occurs by having that happen over and over and over again, or sometimes maybe not over and over again, but just once, but that being really significant to you, it can harbor, like, some energy that you've been holding. Also, a sign of having your boundaries ignored is when, like, there is this really distancing that happens, where we, reject others before having them reject us. We, have these boundaries that are so completely rigid and firm and high and dense that we can't connect with others, and sometimes we can't even connect with ourselves. So recognizing again with boundaries, they most boundaries should be flexible, where it shifts so that it's not completely rigid and firm and completely blocking off. Like, it could be a little bit open. And again, sometimes with boundaries, like, if it's, like, too open, sometimes there's this, like, smothering that occurs where it's just like nothing that you have is your own, where you feel like you have no freedom, no independence, feeling really overwhelmed by, like, oh, you should feel this, you should do that, you should think this, think that. There's no sense of privacy or solitude, sanctuary where you can just be. And with all this, seeing that, our society, with it being really like, oh, you need to, like, focus on money, and, like, you need to, do all these things, and, you need to be a certain way. Like, it's hard to set boundaries because these systems don't want us to, so even beyond systems, some people don't want us to, because if we start setting boundaries, that means, that may mean in some situations we won't be doing the things that they should be doing anymore, if that makes sense. Like, oh, you've been doing all these things for me, so, like, you're gonna stop now? Like, no, I don't want you to stop. Keep on doing the things for me. Like, forget about your boundaries. I want you to keep on doing that for me. It may be painful for boundary setting to happen, because by setting those boundaries, that means relationship may be ending. So thinking about, hey, are you scared of setting boundaries, or are you scared of losing relationships? Also, understanding that, some folks, they're fearful of setting boundaries because they're scared of appearing selfish, or scared of like having that be conflict, by setting boundaries. Recognizing again, that boundary sharing, boundary setting is something that is intimate, something that is genuine and real, and an openness for connection and vulnerability. For some folks, they may feel like they don't deserve boundaries because of how they've been treated, how they've been raised. They may have felt like, like you hurt me before, so you don't get to tell me that I can't do this, I can't do that. Or, they may feel that like, oh, like you don't trust me to like do this or do that. Or like, oh, I've given you so much and like you're telling me that I can't do this, I can't do that. It's again important to recognize that you're not responsible for how folks react to and feel about your boundaries. You're responsible for identifying, recognizing, and expressing those boundaries with folks. And of course, again, coming to this sense of like sometimes conflict because it feels really, really hard, really uncomfortable. Especially because again, like sometimes there's a huge narrative around, nice people doing things like all the time and like giving and doing all the things all the time. It's important to think about like, where does our sense of self-worth come from? Is it only from what we can do, what we can give, rather than just who we are? It's harder to set boundaries if your sense of self-worth is only defined by what you can do for another person. There's also a fear of intimacy, a fear of connection, because again, by sharing your boundaries, you're sharing what you really think, what you really feel, what you really believe, what you really want. So by sharing that with another person, you're being really vulnerable, and you're showing that you really care about them enough, you really care about this relationship enough to let that be known, to let yourself be known. And again, as what I was saying earlier, like boundary work, it's not always with another person, it's sometimes just with you. Like being able to be more fully in connection with yourself by recognizing what your boundaries are and recognizing how you feel and what you're thinking about in that moment, and not denying that, not rationalizing it away, not suppressing it and pushing it down. Just, okay, this is what I feel, this is what I think right now. Okay, and holding that. So while, again, sometimes having all these really rigid like boundaries, or by cutting ourselves off from all these different things, it may feel like this is like an armor of protecting me so that I don't get hurt. Yes, it does do that, and that armor can get really heavy sometimes. That armor can be really like difficult to like connect with you underneath. Difficult to connect, and again within yourself and also with other people. Some guidance, on boundaries within your body, just listening to that and just seeing like, oh, it's like my heart's racing really fast, my palms are sweating, my head is spinning, like, whoa, like something's happening in my body. Thinking about, hey, is there a boundary that's being pushed on? Is there a boundary that's being violated? Just taking a deep breath, just okay, seeing how you feel. Where are you at right now? Some emotional guidance on boundaries. Just, learning to, pick up on these little signals and really honoring yourself and those signals that come when you feel like your boundaries are beginning to be pushed. It's a great way to help prevent these really uncontrolled releases of anger, of frustration, of disappointment, sadness, grief, all these things from just exploding because, you let folks know, or you like become known within yourself, this is something that's important to me. So whenever you're feeling really like resentful or upset or you're complaining about something, think about, hey, is there a boundary here that I need to think about more? Is there a boundary here that I need to share with others? Just think about that. And again, realizing that by doing this work, you can live a more fuller life within yourself and live a more fuller life with other folks. So when setting boundaries, it's important to start small, especially when you're not really used to setting boundaries. Do things that have, a lighter emotional weight to them. And first, just think about why you want this boundary. What's your intention behind it? Why is it important? And sometimes, while you're starting out doing it, just saying that. Why this is important for me. And then asking for that. And when folks, are able to respect that boundary, letting them know, hey, thank you. Again, if it's appropriate. Again, you don't need to apologize or thanks folks for boundaries all the time. It's not necessary. It's opening up. If you want to, yeah, but it's not necessary. And within this process of like starting out, like if you see someone who has been able to express their boundaries really well, and folks have been receptive to that, you can ask them, just be like, hey, like I see you, like being really good at setting boundaries. I'm trying to work on that. Do you think you can help me out? This process again can be really, really difficult. It can bring up a lot of feelings. So having help is great. Additionally, sometimes by just saying straight up, like, I feel super nervous about saying this boundary with you, or, I feel super nervous about this thing that I'm going to share with you. Sometimes just saying how you feel can sometimes, like, okay, bring yourself back down and, like, re-ground yourself to become more centered to share. So you can just say straight up, like, hey, I'm really, really nervous about sharing this with you, and this is really important to me. And then coming in with that. And so thinking again, if you have, trouble with saying no to someone, reminding yourself and telling them why this boundary is important, and if or when that person is like, no, I don't want to like listen to that boundary. I don't want to like abide by that. Think about, are you willing to compromise? Like, is that something that is a subject that is compromisable for you, or is that something that is like, no, I cannot compromise this at all? Because again, like your responsibility here is just expressing what you need and realizing that within yourself. Your responsibility is not other people's reactions and other people's responses to what you say. Your responsibility And this work is, for yourself with yourself, and like, yes, to be in connection with others, but what others say should not dictate how you feel, how you think, how you are, or how like how you want to be, who you want to be. So, just recognizing again, this stuff is stuff, and if you want more support on it, we're here for you. We're here to help you out. So, hope y'all take care, and we'll see each other soon.
Hi, welcome to the Harvest training. This year, our training is called Improving Relationships Through Boundary Setting and Healthy Communications. My name is Chelsea. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm one of the counselors in training at SCARE.
And my name is Caitlin, and I'm also a counseling trainee at SCARE, and my pronouns are she, hers. So today we're basically going to be discussing how to manage conflicts that may come up over the holidays and the season while you're gathering with family and friends, and even just gathering with gatherings increasing after COVID. So we're going to help you look at how to communicate better, how to improve your interpersonal relationships within your family and your extended family, and some skills that you can use to be more assertive and just communicate better overall with your loved ones. So the first thing we're going to go over is a skill called Dear Man. So Dear Man is an acronym, and each letter of this stands for something. So the first one is D, and that is describe.
And so describing the situation in concrete terms without judgment. So it's really important to, when we're communicating with someone, we really want to do that without any judgment in like our body language, or even like being mindful of the words that we're using when we're speaking to somebody.
Yeah, so for this part, it's important to just kind of be objective and not really put your feelings into it. And then in the next part, it's E for express. So this is where you want to express your feelings and convey to the other party how it makes you feel. So you really want to make sure you're using I statements instead of accusatory statements. So for this, you would, instead of you made me feel bad, you would say I feel bad. This relieves blame from the other party and prevents defensiveness, and just helps the situation to overall go smoother between the two parties.
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that communicating with someone works best when both parties are calm. So that's a really important emotion to kind of like remember when you're communicating with somebody.
Yeah, and if it feels like the conversation isn't calm at any point, it's okay to say, hey, let's take a 5-minute break and come back to this when we feel better. Or even like, hey, I'm not in a place to have this conversation today. Let's have it on X date. Just set an intentional time to have it rather than avoiding it.
Yeah. And the next letter is A, which is means assert. So assert your wishes, meaning clearly stating what you do or do not want.
So this is a good place to think about what you might need in the moment and name those needs. So you might want connection, you might want something specific from somebody, you may want them to help you out with something for the holidays. There's a lot of extra work and things that can come up with family around holidays. So you can think about what needs you may have in regard to people assisting you with that. And our next one is R. So R is for reinforce. And so reinforcing is you want to reinforce why the desired outcome is desirable and reward people who respond positively to the request. So with Dear Man, you're trying to get some sort of need or desire met, right? So you want to reinforce why it is that the outcome is what you want it to be. And then if it's responded to positively, you obviously want to reward that in some way.
Mm-hmm. And also it's important to remember to explaining how getting your needs met will also benefit the other person as well. You always want to be thinking about that too. And then the next letter is M for mindful. So it's exactly what it sounds like, being mindful and present in the moment, focused on the current goal of the situation. So trying to remember not to steer off onto another topic and staying with the topic in order to focus on what both parties are wanting to address is really important.
Yeah, and on that note, it's really important to only bring up one issue at a time. So during the holidays, a lot of things can get stirred up and it can become a competition of, well, I need this, well, I need this, and you did this, and you don't want to get to that place. So you want to focus on one thing and have a common goal in mind so that you can stay focused and not have the both of you get dysregulated and start saying things that may hurt one another. You really want to just focus on one thing at a time and, prioritize what needs to be addressed the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next one is A for appear. And so you want to appear confident. So this can look like body posture and, making sure that you're not slumped, you're making eye contact, you have a steady voice. You don't want to be speaking too loudly to someone to intimidate them. You don't want to speak too softly. You just want to make sure that you're being aware of your body language.
Yeah, and I think appearing confident can be hard for some people, especially when we're communicating with others and it's turning into a conflict, or it is a conflict. So trying to appear confident, even if you don't feel confident, can really help communicate what you want to communicate to the other party more effectively.
Absolutely. And the last one, and possibly the most important one, is N for negotiate. So you want to be willing to negotiate and give in order to get what it is you're after. So you want to make sure that both parties have valid needs and feelings and understand that both of you are trying to get some sort of need met, and you need to negotiate and be able to compromise on that depending on what the issue is. And just be open to understanding that you may not get exactly the outcome you want, but it's okay to negotiate and it's okay to find something that leaves both of you, winning and feeling good about the situation rather than feeling like only one person is going to come out of the situation happy.
Okay, so another thing that's really important to remember too is to really be gentle and approach the other party in a non-threatening manner, avoiding attacks and judgmental statements. I know that we kind of previously talked about that before, but this is really going to help kind of diffuse a conflict that's starting to get out of control.
Yeah, and some things you can think about when you're thinking about how to be gentle is, monitoring your tone. So, like, how loud is your voice? How are you speaking to the person? Your body posture as well. If your partner is sitting down and you're standing over them, that can feel pretty unsafe and intimidating. We want to kind of be on even levels, or if you're talking to your kids, it's best to kind of be at eye level so that you can take this gentle approach and just, again, manage your volume and be able to regulate yourself in this space. And if you feel like you can't, if you feel like you're going to yell or you're just getting too angry and just like it's getting to that boiling point where you're like a teapot and it's just going over, then it's okay to be like, hey, I got to step away for X amount of time. Let's come back to this and just give a time and date that you feel you'll be regulated by. So sometimes that'll mean you can step away and take 10 minutes to do a meditation or do some breathing exercises, or even do breathing exercises in the moment, or even ask the person to regulate with you. But sometimes it can mean that it needs to be set aside for a couple of days or to when things are less stressful for you.
Mm-hmm. Also, I want to mention too, or add on to how important it is to be mindful and aware of our body language, because nonverbals communicate a lot more powerfully than our verbals do. And simply just relaxing your posture can also signal to your brain to calm your emotions, which is really, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, and our partners tend to mirror what we're doing with our bodies. So if they're pretty activated and we're not, it's a really good way to help calm them by showing our physical calmness. So that's a way to help kiddos and partners and even friends when you're having these tough conversations. So the next one is showing you're interested is really important. So you need to show that you're really listening to the other person and not interrupting them. You don't want to seem like you just want to get the conversation done with, like it's a burden. You don't want to make anybody feel bad when they're expressing something. probably pretty important to them. And it's important not to interrupt. So a way you can do this is to use active listening and give each other each turns essentially. So when the other person's talking, you need to wait until they're done and then say your piece. It's okay to ask, are you ready for me to respond to that? Or are you in a place for me to respond to that to see if you're at that place yet?
Yeah. And also, it's really important to kind of validate the other partner and acknowledge the other partner's or other person's wishes, feelings, or opinions. So validating is really, really important. And when you notice the urge to accuse a loved one, a family member, or a friend, one or like one of their faults or anything like that, say something encouraging instead. I know it sounds kind of funny, and you might be thinking like, why would I validate someone I'm angry with? But kind of two reasons. First, validating makes that person more likely to be receptive when you do make a request, because validation will take them out of that defensive mode. And then secondly, it will help you gain some perspective and kind of lower your emotional intensity towards the situation, because you both will be reminded of why you care about the other person and why maybe this relationship is important to you. So validating is super important.
And so lastly, I really want to stress again that it's important to remain like lighthearted and just like be yourself and don't allow things to escalate if it's not necessary. Staying calm is really important in these conversations and can make it safe for both people to be able to fully be present and discuss what needs to be discussed without hurting one another.
Okay, so another thing that we wanted to mention that's really important is that it's important to be fair. And what I mean by that is it's important for you yourself to be fair while in a conflict, and also to the other party to avoid a resentment on both sides. And this is to make sure that you both are getting what you need, and actually being fair will bring you closer. And it may not seem like that in the moment, but being fair is really important so both people are heard. And that also leads us into apologizing.
So for apologizing, you want to make sure that you're taking responsibility when it's appropriate. You don't want to be someone who's apologizing for things you didn't do or that aren't actually things you need to take accountability for. But when there is something that you feel you need to take accountability for, it's really important to make sure you are taking accountability and apologizing to the other person and addressing it in a calm and clear way. You don't want to apologize in a non-genuine way because it really isn't an apology if it's not genuine.
Yeah, and also sticking to your values and not compromising your integrity to gain an outcome is really important.
Yeah, and it can be really hard because you can feel like someone might reject you for you sticking to your boundaries or values, but at the end of the day, it's important to stay true to yourself, and it's not worth acting like you're someone else in order to keep someone from reacting a specific way, because we can't control someone else's reactions or how they're going to feel about what we say.
Yeah, and also just being truthful with the person that you're trying to communicate with or in conflict with um, is going to help again, just bring you closer to that person and kind of resolve whatever is going on.
Yeah, and part of that is making sure that like the way that you're behaving is not manipulative in any way. So this can be acting like you're helpless in some way, not using any skills to regulate yourself, expecting things from the other person that are just not a reasonable expectation. So to make sure that you're not doing that and allowing this to actually really be a fair conversation is really important, because if conflict is done correctly, it can be a positive thing that can help strengthen a relationship and strengthen a family and even improve a bond, especially with the repair process. So not always seeing it, as this thing that's this awful bad thing and should be avoided, when really it's okay to face conflict, and conflict can, be positive, and it's important to all relationships and is just a part of life.
Yeah, and it's okay that conflict can be hard, but like Caitlin said, it can always lead to growth and change, which is a good outcome of conflict.
Yeah, and we always, at the end of the day, we just want to be empathetic in our relationships at all times and try to see the other person's point of view and see, what might be happening for them. How are they experiencing this? What might be impacting how they're experiencing this? And what might be, and giving yourself that empathy too. Empathy really can reduce anger for ourselves and for others so much. And it's important to just hold that in that space when you're trying to communicate things.
Okay, so also during a conversation with someone or when you're trying to communicate with someone, it's again really important to truly listen and practice putting yourself in their shoes. And this will really help you better understand their perspective, empathize with them, and also leave room for being able to compromise. It's never a good idea to avoid an argument. That's not healthy, and really to start being okay with disagreement within a conversation with someone or a conflict with someone.
Yeah, and additionally, something else to keep in mind is that to know what it means to be in the place to have a discussion like this. So if any of your physical needs are not met or you're emotionally heightened, it's not a good time to have one of these discussions. So if you're hungry, if you're lonely, you're tired, you're feeling sick, or if you're feeling really angry or really upset, those aren't a good time to address something with someone else. And you should wait till you have all your needs met and you're feeling calmer so you can both be in a good space to have that discussion. So now we're going to move into an activity where you can bond with your kids and kind of connect with the people around you, and it's called a gratitude tree. So this is a good opportunity to be able to kind of reflect and be mindful and just look at the things that are adding positivity to your life, having a good effect, and just overall having a good impact in your life and what you're grateful for, and just having a moment to be able to reflect with those you love, especially in this time of the year and after the last couple of years with COVID. It's really good to take a second to look at the things that you do have and the things that add joy to your life when things have been difficult for many of us. So as we said, we'll be working on this gratitude tree. So you should have received this in your packet, as well as a pair of scissors. And then you should have also gotten a glue stick and then all of these sheets of leaves on some cardstock. So what you're going to do is, we've already pre-cut our leaves out, but you're going to cut your leaves out with your kiddos, and you're going to use your glue stick and glue them onto the tree and write what you are grateful for on each leaf to essentially create this gratitude tree to show all the different things that you and your family are grateful for this season and towards the end of this year as a time to just kind of reflect.
Yeah, and this is just a fun way to even just like start conversations with like your kids or family members. And like Caitlin said, just like reflect about like what has been important to you, or like what gratitude means to you. And also in doing this, there's lots of benefits of gratitude, such as like better sleep, having more positive outlook and attitude, simply just feeling like less stress or sadness from thinking about gratitude and or things that you're grateful for in your life. And it also can just lead to better self-esteem and creating more healthier relationships with like family members, or like creating more connection with family members or your kids or whoever's around you when you're doing this.
Mm-hmm. And a regular gratitude practice can actually really help symptoms of anxiety and depression and things like that, and reduce stress overall, because it helps you see the good things in your life and reflect on what's going positively, even when things may be really difficult. So you can use this activity to really reflect and hone in on those things and see what you can focus more on the day-to-day to improve your mood. So as you can see, this is our little gratitude tree we made. So we've got different leaves that say different things. So we have friends, home, family, pets, our health, and our jobs. Your gratitude tree may have different things. It could have anything that you feel grateful for. It could be your kids, or just having a roof over your head, having food this holiday season, being able to reconnect after COVID and things like that, being able to be in person, safety, even just things you enjoy like movies and Netflix, and being able to go on a walk or whatever it may be, because it's really important to be able to look at these kind of good parts of your life even if things are difficult, so you can kind of increase that positivity bias, because our brains really like to hook on to negative things and not positive things. So creating the time to intentionally focus on the positive can really affect our mood.
Yeah, and that kind of like leads into the importance of establishing even like a gratitude ritual that you do every day with like your friends, and or maybe more like family or whoever's around you most. So like, for example, that could look um like sharing one thing you're grateful for like each day, like at the end of the day with family members before you go to bed, or saying asking your kids like 3 things they're grateful for at the end of the day. That can look that ritual can look different for everyone or every family.
Yeah, and this is something you can model for your kids as well, and kind of you could do it somewhere on a whiteboard in your house or a chalkboard somewhere publicly, so that they can see you intentionally choosing to see these little parts of your life that bring joy to you. Or you can incorporate your kids, and like Chelsea said, you could do this at bedtime, and you could each share something you're grateful for, even during dinner at the dinner table, or during breakfast, before school, on the way to school. But incorporating it into your daily routine is really the best way to have it have this lasting impact on your mood and life. So for me, I like to do gratitude lists. I think that it's a really simple way to incorporate gratitude in the everyday, and you can kind of just do like a couple things that you feel grateful for that day. I think it's also a good way to increase your presence if you choose things specifically from that day. So it could be something like, saw a cute dog on my walk this morning, or got my exercise in, or my kids went to bed on time, or whatever it may be, to kind of increase that mindfulness as well. There's a lot of different ways you can incorporate gratitude, though, and show your gratitude to others as well as for your general life.
So similarly to Caitlin, I also like to do a gratitude journal. So just simply writing down 3 things I'm grateful for that day or that week could be helpful. And also I find helpful like writing a daily affirmation for myself. So this is Caitlin's gratitude tree, and this is hopefully what yours will look like at the end of the activity. We hope this is a fun activity that you use with your kids or your family, and it just gives you a moment to kind of just pause, live in the moment, and reflect upon the things you're grateful for, and a way to just connect with your family.